Welcome to Echoes of the Unknown, the podcast where we'll be exploring some of the world's most fascinating unsolved mysteries. I'm Jack Montgomery, and today we're traveling back to 2003 when federal prosecutor Jonathan Luna left his Baltimore office one night. His body was found the next morning in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Investigators, coroners, and federal authorities have spent years examining his final journey, only to arrive at conflicting conclusions. His death is one of the most baffling cases in recent American true crime history. Jonathan Luna was a 38-year-old assistant United States attorney, a position also referred to as a federal prosecutor. Born in New York City on October 21, 1965, he grew up in the Patterson houses near Yankee Stadium in the South Bronx. His father was Filipino and his mother was African American. Jonathan received his undergraduate degree from Fordham University and later studied at the University of North Carolina School of Law. After working at Arnold and Porter in Washington, D.C. from 1993 to 1994, he worked at the Federal Trade Commission from 1994 to 1997. Jonathan then served as a prosecutor in Brooklyn, New York, before moving to Baltimore, Maryland, to become an assistant U.S. attorney. On August 29, 1993, he married Angela Hopkins, an obstetrician, and the couple ended up having 2 children. December 3, 2003 marked the beginning of the end of Jonathan's life. The facts are both clear and haunting. When he showed up for work that day at the federal courthouse in downtown Baltimore, Jonathan was in the middle of prosecuting the trial of rapper Deion Smith and Walter O'Reilly Poindexter, who were charged with running a major heroin trafficking ring out of their Stash House Records music studio in Baltimore. He had spent the morning in court and the evening speaking with defense attorneys. Poindexter's defense attorney, Arcangelo Tuminelli, said that he last saw Jonathan at 6 p.m. after finishing up a meeting where both sides had agreed to a plea deal. Jonathan had told Tuminelli that he would finish the paperwork for the plea bargain that evening. He then went home to his Howard County townhouse for several hours before returning to the office around 8:30 p.m. At 9:06 p.m., Jonathan left a voicemail for Tuminelli, telling him once again that he planned to finish the plea deal paperwork that night and would fax copies to him, as he would need it the next morning. Tuminelli later told a Baltimore TV station, "He told me he was going back to the office to finalize both written agreements, and he was going to fax it that night. I told him, fine. I was anticipating it would be on the fax machine in the morning. It did not come." Later that night at around 11:30 p.m., Jonathan left his office at the Baltimore courthouse. Strangely, he left behind several personal items that he normally would have taken with him. His cell phone was left on his desk in the office, as were his eyeglasses. The latter in particular was very difficult to explain, given that he needed his glasses to drive. Authorities say Jonathan drove nearly 100 miles north and west on Interstate 95, crossing state lines and traveling through Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. A retracing of his steps showed that at 12:57 a.m., $200 was withdrawn from his bank account from the ATM at the JFK Plaza Service Center near Newark, Delaware. He used his EZ Pass to cross into Delaware, but after 3 toll interchanges, he inexplicably switched to buying toll tickets. At 2:47 a.m., Jonathan continued north and crossed the Delaware River into New Jersey, most likely via the Delaware Memorial Bridge. He then got on the New Jersey Turnpike, traveling west. He crossed back over the Delaware River into Pennsylvania via the Delaware River Bridge Toll Plaza onto the Pennsylvania Turnpike. At 3:20 a.m., his debit card was used to buy gas at a service plaza in King of Prussia. At 4:04 a.m., Jonathan's car exited the turnpike at the Reading-Lancaster interchange. Authorities later determined that the toll ticket had a spot of his blood on it, suggesting that he may have already been injured. His final destination in that journey would become a question that no court, no investigator, and no family member could ever fully answer over all the years since. At 5 a.m. on December 4th, the first employee arrived for work at the Sensnig and Weaverwell Drilling Company in Denver, Pennsylvania, in the rural Brecknock Township area of Lancaster County. Half an hour later, at approximately 5:30 a.m., he noticed a vehicle in the back, partially submerged on the edge of a shallow creek off the Pennsylvania Turnpike. The car's lights were off, its door was ajar, and its engine was idling. Nearby in the cold water lay a man's body. When responders and police investigators arrived, they found a gruesome scene. Blood was smeared over the driver's door and the front left of the car. The body, almost immediately identified as Jonathan's, was found lying face down in the creek under the front of the car. He was wearing a suit and a black overcoat and still had his court ID around his neck. A pool of blood was found on the floor of the rear seat. Jonathan had been stabbed 36 times. The wounds scattered across his neck, chest, and torso. Despite that, the official cause of death on his death certificate was not listed as a stabbing, but rather freshwater drowning. He had presumably died in the creek itself, face down in the cold water, his life slipping away unnoticed in that silent rural landscape. Even though there was a search involving at least 100 state police cadets around the creek right after Jonathan's body was found, they did not immediately find any evidence of interest. But 2 months after his death, in early February 2004, authorities reported that they had recently found Jonathan's pocket knife in the stream near where his body was discovered. It was subsequently identified as the weapon used to stab him. The coroner who conducted the autopsy, Dr. Wayne Ross of Lancaster County, ruled Jonathan's death a homicide. He concluded that the combination of stab wounds and drowning showed he had been attacked and left or placed in the water to die. The coroner said the pool of blood in the back seat of the car suggested that Jonathan may have been in the back while someone else was driving. Other coroners in Lancaster County would later reaffirm that assessment, holding firm to the conclusion that he had been murdered. On December 15, a funeral was held for Jonathan at the Longreach Church of God in Columbia, Maryland. The church was adorned with lighted Christmas trees, wreaths, and red poinsettias. More than 1,000 mourners showed up and 8 eulogies were given. Jonathan was remembered as a loving husband and father, and as a passionate public servant. In addition to his wife, he left behind 2 young sons, aged 5 years and 10 months. The FBI started an investigation right away. Their first thought was that Jonathan's death could be related to his work as a federal prosecutor, possibly even related to the drug trafficking case that he was working on when he died. However, that theory seemed to be dismissed early. Both defendants were in jail when Jonathan died, and they eventually agreed to the plea deal he had prepared, so there didn't seem to be any motive for them to want him dead. Of course, it's not surprising that federal prosecutors are likely to make their fair share of enemies, some of whom could be dangerous, but there didn't seem to be any particular case or person of interest that would stand out in Jonathan's death. The FBI found no connection to anyone he had prosecuted who might have had a vendetta or wanted retribution. A federal investigator was quoted as saying, "In a professional rub-out, they'd put one in the back of your head and dump you in the harbor." There's something else going on here we don't see. Early in March 2004, Media reports based on law enforcement sources mentioned that federal investigators were increasingly considering the possibility that Jonathan might have killed himself, reflecting an internal shift toward the suicide theory among some federal agents. In December 2004, approximately 1 year after his death, the FBI released a statement to the press acknowledging that a year-long federal investigation had found no trace of a culprit, no suspect, no accomplice, and no evidence that someone else had been with Jonathan between the hours he left his office and the discovery of his body. The FBI said that while the Bureau did not rule out homicide, the weight of the evidence suggested that he may have taken his own life. The suggestion of suicide shocked those who knew Jonathan. His mother rejected the idea outright, and local coroners insisted that such a conclusion was inconsistent with the physical evidence. After all, how could a man stab himself dozens of times, including in areas like the back of his neck, and then walk into a freezing creek to drown? They asked. And if suicide was the explanation, why would Jonathan have driven nearly 100 miles from Baltimore and without his glasses and cell phone? It's important to consider something noteworthy that was happening around the time Jonathan died. In September of 2002, he and his co-prosecutor, Jackie Rodriguez-Coss, had won a conviction in a federal bank robbery case against a man named Nakoi Ray Brown. About $36,000 in cash was briefly introduced as evidence in the trial. Shortly after the trial, the money disappeared somewhere between the courtroom and the evidence storage area. During the course of the ensuing investigation, several people had taken polygraph tests. According to the Baltimore Sun, around the time of his death, Jonathan was preparing to take a polygraph test as well. He had already canceled the test once, citing his workload as a reason. It had been rescheduled to take place shortly after the date he died. In addition to the looming polygraph test concerning the missing money, there are other arguments in support of the theory that Jonathan's death was a suicide. First of all, it was initially reported that he did not have substantial defensive wounds on his hands, which would have been expected if he had been attacked by someone else. Many of the stab wounds were shallow, which are called hesitation wounds in a suicide victim. In addition, some people have proposed an accidental suicide theory, which hypothesizes that Jonathan was trying to fabricate a kidnapping and went too far in the attempt. Jonathan's family and close friends were all convinced that he was murdered, and they believed it most likely involved one of the federal cases he had prosecuted. However, some interesting information came out during an interview that investigators had with his father, Paul. According to Paul, his son had apparently traveled to the Philadelphia area in the months before his death. The last time he saw Jonathan was on Thanksgiving Day, November 27. When Paul mentioned their weekend plans to go to New York City together, Jonathan replied, "Not this week, Dad. I'm sorry, because I have a case. I have to go to Pennsylvania." However, there was no official court business documented in Pennsylvania at that time. The only trial Jonathan was prosecuting was being held in Baltimore. Just 6 days later, Jonathan would go on that mysterious trip to Pennsylvania, where his body would end up being found. The FBI investigation pieced together the route that Jonathan took that night by using electronic toll and credit card receipts, surveillance videos, and interviews with workers who may have seen him, for example, possibly at rest stops. As they did so, the pieces only seemed to add to the mystery. Why did Jonathan take a roundabout route through 3 states to ultimately get to a rural, out-of-the-way spot in the middle of the night? If he had wanted to go to that specific area in Lancaster County, 2 highway routes would have taken him there in just over an hour. The route he took added more than 1 hour to his trip. The investigation also revealed that everything may not have been going smoothly at his job. He was apparently under some stress there, and some of his colleagues said that he had clashed with his boss, U.S. Attorney Thomas DiBiagio. They also thought DiBiagio was trying to push him out and said Jonathan had hired his own attorney to represent him on job-related issues. However, DiBiagio refuted all of these claims and stated that Jonathan was not in fear of losing his job at the time of his death. As part of the comprehensive FBI investigation, and with no real leads as far as anyone wanting retaliation against Jonathan, the focus then turned to taking a closer look at his personal life. According to his family and friends, he was happily married, a devoted father, and wasn't involved in anything dangerous or shady in his private life. However, a 2003 Time magazine article reported that FBI investigators had located two internet personal ads, dating from 1997, with a profile that matched Jonathan's age and marital status, and were signed with his three initials, but backwards. The article did also note that another person with the same name, who was a much younger, convicted sex offender, might have been responsible for the postings. The same Time article and other news accounts from the period mentioned that the FBI examination turned up messages on adult websites placed by someone identifying himself as Jonathan Luna, seeking female sex partners. But the reports also highlighted investigators' uncertainty about whether those online profiles or posts were actually connected to Jonathan or were simply coincidental. There was also a point at which FBI agents looked into the possibility that Jonathan had had a personal or romantic relationship with a female agent. According to contemporaneous reports, FBI supervisors in the Baltimore field office questioned one of their own female agents about Jonathan, including asking whether she had been having an affair with him. She was ordered to turn over her personal computer for examination as part of that inquiry. The agent denied any romantic or sexual involvement with Jonathan. A subsequent Justice Department Office of Inspector General report found credible evidence of serious misconduct in how the FBI handled this internal investigation and the interrogation of the agent. The report criticized the way agents were questioned and noted that the agent was subjected to inappropriate treatment by her supervisors. There was no evidence uncovered that Jonathan actually had an affair with this agent. The suspicion appears to have arisen from rumors and internal speculation, rather than any substantiated facts. The focus on this unproven theory became a distraction in the broader investigation into Jonathan's death. FBI investigators looked into Jonathan's financial situation as part of the broader probe into his death. They discovered that he had considerable credit card debt and financial stress that he had not disclosed to his wife. Some reports said that he had as many as 16 credit cards and as much as $25,000 in credit card debt. His wife was reportedly unaware of at least one of those credit cards. They also reportedly found that Jonathan had submitted a loan application for roughly $30,000, and that the application was later canceled not long after the approximately $36,000 in evidence cash from the bank robbery prosecution he handled went missing. However, investigators never publicly concluded that Jonathan took the missing cash or directly connected his loan application to the disappearance of the money. Only that the timing of these financial actions drew scrutiny as part of their larger, unresolved investigation. Public interest in the case grew over the years, partly because of its sheer mystery, and partly because authorities on different levels could not agree on a narrative. For decades, records related to Jonathan's autopsy and the coroner's investigation were hidden from public view. In 2019, local newspaper publisher LNP Media Group requested a copy of his autopsy records from the Lancaster County coroner's office. The district attorney's office replied to the request and only said, "The coroner has no records relating to Jonathan Luna." Then in January 2020, the records were found amongst the county archives in the basement at the Lancaster Government Center. Shortly thereafter, the district attorney's office moved to seal them, arguing that releasing them could jeopardize an active investigation into Jonathan's death. In February of that year, LNP once again requested that a judge unseal the autopsy records. However, on January 13, 2021, Judge David Ashworth ruled that the documents would remain sealed, writing that releasing the records would pose a threat of substantially hindering or jeopardizing the open, active, and ongoing criminal investigation into the death of Jonathan Luna. In December 2023, the current Lancaster County coroner, Dr. Stephen Diamantoni, spoke to News 8, a local TV station in Lancaster, about how he viewed Jonathan's case. He said, "I have to support the conclusions drawn by my predecessors that he indeed did die as a result of a homicide. Our death investigators appraise the entire death scene and review all the evidence at the scene, and we review the evidence at the time of the autopsy in making that determination. The evidence is compelling that this is a homicide." In November of 2024, LNP filed their request for the third time to have the autopsy records made public. 1 year later, on November 22, 2025, the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office formally dropped its opposition and asked the court to vacate the seal. It noted that releasing the records would not impede the ongoing investigation into Jonathan's death, a conclusion ultimately reached after a state police re-examination of the case. On November 25th, Lancaster County Judge David Ashworth ordered the detailed written autopsy report unsealed, effectively making it publicly accessible shortly thereafter. The move was hailed by journalists and advocates for transparency as a significant step in understanding what really happened more than 2 decades ago. "I think it's really a step forward for transparency," said Paula Knudsen-Burke, attorney at Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. She called autopsy files important public records produced with taxpayer funds and said, "It's been a long haul, and of course, when you're talking about these kinds of records, there's a balancing that goes on between the public's right to know and is there an investigation that might be impaired. So we appreciate the district attorney's office coming down on the side of transparency." The autopsy report says that Jonathan suffered multiple stab wounds to his neck, chest, and abdomen. He also had multiple wounds and cuts to his hands and a circular bruise to his left wrist region. The report cites a fresh contusion to his lower left leg and incisions over both of his knees and the back of his legs. Of the 36 stab wounds or cuts to Jonathan's body, 23 were to his neck. The report said that 19 of them were superficial wounds, but 4 penetrated the subcutaneous tissue and went into the underlying neck structure. Despite the release of those written records, key pieces of the puzzle remain unavailable or incomplete. For instance, the Lancaster County Coroner's Office has stated that it does not have any autopsy photographs of Jonathan in its possession, even though the official report references pictures taken by investigators at the time. Whether those images exist elsewhere, perhaps in archived state police files or FBI evidence lockers, remains a matter of ongoing inquiry by the press and public records requesters. No explanation has been given for the disappearance of those photos. As of today, no arrests have ever been made in connection with Jonathan's death. There have been no named suspects, no trials, no clear motives, and, in many ways, no definitive answers. The case is officially open in Pennsylvania, and it remains classified as a homicide. as per the rulings of Lancaster County authorities, including 2 successive coroners. Additional evidence collected during the investigation captured a second blood type and a partial print, as well as some grainy footage from near the time of the gas station purchase made with Jonathan's credit card at the King of Prussia Service Plaza. The investigation remains ongoing, and there is an unclaimed federal reward of $100,000 for information leading to a conviction. The enduring mystery of Jonathan's death has inspired books, documentaries, and countless discussions among true crime aficionados and journalists alike. The 2004 book, The Midnight Ride of Jonathan Luna, and later film adaptations, have attempted to explore the strange journey that took a promising attorney from the courthouse steps in Baltimore into a frozen Pennsylvania creek. To this day, some see the case as a deliberate act of self-harm, while others are convinced a killer remains at large. In the end, Jonathan's story is not just about his 36 stab wounds or the rural Pennsylvania creek. It's about a life cut short, the limits of investigation, and conflicting perspectives between state and federal authorities. His death still resists a single, clear explanation. Official records disagree, evidence remains incomplete, and the line between certainty and speculation is still blurred. What remains undeniable is that a life was lost, a family was forever changed, and important questions were left unanswered. For Jonathan's family and loved ones, the passage of time has not lessened the pain or the desire for answers. 2 decades later, they continue to seek clarity on the night that changed everything. Jonathan's life, his career, and his death sit at the intersection of unanswered questions and unresolved evidence. It's a reminder that, even in an age of forensic science and digital records, not all mysteries find closure. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Echoes of the Unknown. If you found this story compelling, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with fellow mystery lovers. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the most troubling mysteries aren't defined by what we know, but by what the truth refuses to explain.